Hi, I'm Mike Glenn, and I am the president of the Engaged Church Network, and you have joined us today on this podcast, and we're glad to welcome you. Today, our guest is Tommy Rhodes. Tommy is the president, executive director, chief bottle washer, anything needs to be done at Barefoot Republic. And it is a camp ministry that Tommy and his wife started several years ago. And here's the reason I want to talk to Tommy. We are in a very interesting time in church life, and that is there is so much going on in our world, so much broken, so many opportunities to make difference in people's lives, that the Lord is calling people to unique ministries outside of the traditional ministries of the church. Now, usually when we talk about do you feel God's call in your life, we're talking about worship leadership, we're talking about preaching or that kind of stuff. Tommy felt a very different call. So Tommy, let's go back. You are in school. Mm-hmm. You got your life plan. You're going to be a doctor, some kind of medical field.
I was pursuing a PhD at Vanderbilt in genetic medicine.
And
3 years in.
So
wife thought she married a hotshot scientist.
Yeah. And that's not the kind of thing that when I graduate with a PhD in genetics, that I have a lot of auxiliary options, right? I mean, you're going to do something in genetics with this. But you're in the middle of that, and God starts doing something else in your life. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, really, the Lord just placed me in an incredible lab at Vanderbilt. And for me, science was kind of a means to an end. Mm-hmm. I came from a low-income background, kid raising a kid scenario. And then God gives me this vision to start a summer camp, at 20. And I'm thinking, I don't have two pennies to rub together. Right. How would I ever do something like this? So in my small mind, I felt like, well, let me just put my head down, Lord, and, get all these degrees, become successful, and maybe retire early at 40, 50, 60. And so that was kind of where I was at that point in my life. And fortunately, I met a believer at Vanderbilt. I'll never forget her. Her name was Lisa Ann. And I was just kind of lamenting one day because a lot of my peers felt like I was kind of on the fast track because I was having a lot of worldly success at Vanderbilt, publishing papers in some of the top journals in the world. And, I was just kind of sharing this emptiness I was feeling inside. And I'll never forget, Lisa Ann was like, well, Tommy, did you pray about becoming a scientist? And I was like, no, I just thought if Vanderbilt offered you a $250,000 scholarship,
yeah, no kidding.
You said, thank you very much.
That's obviously the Lord's will.
Yes,
right?
yes. And so really, what she was asking me was, are you being obedient, the call in your life? Mm-hmm. And I wasn't. I was trying to do this vision God gave me in my own strength.
Yeah, we always think that Satan will tempt us with hard things or painful things or destructive things. And he was tempting you with success.
That's right. Yeah, that was the carrot we were all chasing at Vanderbilt. Yeah. And for me, I was fortunate enough to experience some success early because there were a lot of guys there that I met that had been chasing that carrot for 40 years. So that was the turning point for us.
But it's not where you're supposed to be.
That's right.
So you go home and tell your wife.
She had heard the pipe dream about one day starting a summer camp.
One day.
Yeah. What she didn't expect was, that's right. She wasn't anticipating me saying, hey, honey, I think we're supposed to have a yard sale.
Yeah.
And sell our possessions. And I think I'm supposed to, step away from Vanderbilt and go do this now. Yeah. And that's what God was orchestrating. That had happened kind of over a period of 6 months.
Right,
we had found some lake lots a little north of Nashville. Discovered Barren River Lake, which was just so affordable compared to like Tim's Ford and Center Hill. And, I'd done a little due diligence, just dreaming. Mm-hmm. And just the way God opened doors and we landed there, I felt like the Lord was saying, not only is this the place, but now this is the time. So she had a little bit of a heads up, but like I said, kind of cutting that cord, selling our possessions, ultimately my baseball card collection, because eBay came along back in the late 90s.
Which was no small. For those of you who do not collect baseball cards, this was
a nice collection.
This was a nice collection.
Yeah. It was really my refuge as a kid.
Yeah.
I could just kind of lose myself in my card collections when there was chaos at home.
Which was your favorite card?
That I let go of, probably my Nolan Ryan rookie from 1968. Yeah, loved watching Ryan play. And, of course, he spanned my whole childhood into young adulthood because he played for so long. Yeah, so loved the Ryan Express. That was painful to let that one go.
But that was the call.
It was the call, and to think that God had a plan and a purpose for an 8-year-old kid that was riding around, on a banana seat bicycle with binders under his arms, swapping cards, which is so cool to me. I didn't come to faith until I was 16 through a mutual friend, Mac Hanna, who was the closest thing I had to a dad. And we had started over in Nashville after my mom's divorce. And Mac just loved me unconditionally. And just looking back.
Mac did that for a lot of people.
Oh, he sure did. Yeah. Just loved me right where I was. Yeah. And got to go to a church camp. And that gave me the space to ask him, what was so different about you? Because he'd been walking with me for over a year. And I was a knucklehead, teenager, 15, 16 years old. And he pointed back to the gospel. He's like, Tommy, I'm just trying to love you like Jesus loves you. And it was a little awkward, quite frankly. I'd never experienced that type of unconditional love before. So that's when I made a profession of faith at 16. And that was really what got me on this track, to go be a camp counselor when I was 20.
So you go be the camp counselor, and is that when it's deepened into this is what you're going to do the rest of your life? This is your calling.
I mean, God has such an amazing sense of humor,
doesn't he?
I mean, it's just incredible. I was a tennis player in college, and this camp needed a tennis player. And I went to Hillwood High School. This was back when Montgomery Bell Academy was in our district, and our team, we would lose before the match even began, because we felt like we were pulling into Hogwarts, and, kids were pulling out like 7 rackets with different tensions and grip diameters.
Your tennis shoes didn't match.
Exactly. Yeah. They got coaches, we had the biology teacher who would be like, hey, Tommy, I think tennis season's starting next week. Put together a scramble or whatever it is y'all do. Just let me know who's on the team, buddy. Thanks, And so that was how he kind of got his, additional, stipend for the year.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, wow, Lord, this is a camp for affluent kids. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to have anything in common with these kids. They're not going to like me. I'm not going to like them. I can't imagine building relationships and teaching them how to play tennis all summer. I mean, what have I gotten myself into? And I get there, and they actually, asked me to be a cabin counselor. And I thought I was living in the lake house all summer. Right. And I'm just like, did y'all do a background check? It's like, I don't need to be responsible for anybody's life. It's like, what are you talking about? And I'll never forget, the mom just scared the crap out of me. They're walking in, asking me all these questions. I've been there for 12 minutes. I'm like, where's my CIT? Forrest, help, The moms leave. These 8 and 9-year-old boys are just looking up at me like, hey, Mr. Tommy, what's next? And it's a 2-week beginner session, and they start sharing their stories with me. And man, Mike, it was just so transformational for me, because all those, my friend calls them painful gifts that I had experienced in my life. And they were kind of like, why me questions for me spiritually at this time. I just met my dad for the first time. Just all these struggles we were having at home with my mom. And these kids were walking through the same stuff, despite coming from radically different economic backgrounds. And so I just thought, they're rich kids. They got it easy. Yeah. And they're going through divorce. Their parents are alcoholics. Their parents are verbally abusive. Their dad, has a drug addiction. And it's just like, wow, Lord, you're allowing these things that have hurt me to speak truth and encouragement into these 8 and 9-year-old boys. And this is back in the early 90s when we still wrote letters. And so I've still got a box of these letters from these kids. They would go home and just write me throughout the summer, just thanking me, for hanging out with them. Wow. And I'll never forget, I got the courage to call my mom at the end of the summer, because I had a friend that kind of married into a more affluent family, started going to this camp, when I was in middle school. And I was like, Mom, you knew Sean was going. You knew I didn't have a dad or any male role models as a kid. I can't imagine what it would have meant, for a college guy to hang out with me, want to shoot basketball, sit on a bench and have a conversation. I think it would have changed everything, because I was making lots of bad decisions, just kind of modeling, the behaviors and the patterns that I saw, behind closed doors at our house. And I'll never forget, she's like, well, Tommy, did you ask him how much it cost? And I was just like, wow. And so my frustration kind of shifted, from my mom, who didn't deserve it, to God, and I'll never forget, I was going on a run and just kind of having this wrestling match, with the Lord, and just feeling like this was so unfair. Every kid deserves to be in this type of environment. And I just felt like the Holy Spirit was saying, you're right. So why don't you do something about that? So that was really where the journey began at 20, and why I got so committed, to my academic, pursuits, because all I could think of was like, man, this is going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah, and I've got to be able to fund it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't know anything about nonprofit, for-profit. I didn't know anything about business,
Right.
at this point in my life.
Yeah, not if you're getting a PhD in genetics.
That's right. You live in the lab.
That's all you do.
Yes. Do not leave that microscope.
Yeah, that's it. What happens the first time you really sit down and start putting the plan on the legal pad?
Yeah.
And no way you do the math does it add up.
No. And it's so funny that you say legal pad, because my mom, who's still alive, she's not a believer, been praying for her since I was 16 years old. She had got an accounting degree while working at IHOP, as a single mom with me in her hip. And HCA brought her to Nashville after her divorce.
Wow.
And so she started like living the American dream and climbing the corporate ladder. And about this time, I'm 26 years old. She's having a lot of success. And I go and share this with her. And she's like, have you lost your mind? I mean, are you really going to leave Vanderbilt and walk away from this PhD? You're crazy. And she'd heard the pipe dream too. She just thought, that'll never happen.
Right, yeah.
Or it's a long ways away. Surely he's not going to, sacrifice his education
Right.
that he's been blessed with. But she challenged me to put together a business plan. And I mean, I had the camp priced down to the fork, Mike. I mean, I felt like I was prepared for this presentation to my mom. And I start flipping through the legal pad, and she was just laughing. And I'm like, Mom, this is like my dream. I mean, I've spent hours on this. What is so funny, And she's like, don't y'all use Microsoft Excel at Vanderbilt? And I'm just like, oh my goodness, are you kidding me right now? That's what you're thinking about? But yes, I mean, it seemed insurmountable, at the time. And that's when she challenged me. She's like, well, you got to find some land. You're going to have some seed money.
Right.
And that's what got us on the track of having these yard sales and selling that card collection. And I'll never forget coming to her and showing her my bank statement, because we needed about $20,000 to put down on this piece of property that the camp now sits on Barren River Lake. And she was just like, are you kidding me? There's not enough plasma in your body. How in the world did you come up with $20K, She's like, clearly you're doing something illegal. And I was like, you remember those baseball cards? And I mean, we used to go round and round with these cards, because I'd have them strewn all over the house, know? And she's like, are you kidding me? All those cards you've been lugging around that little Century safe, for all these years are worth $20,000. So that was just a really cool God moment, for me. And so that's where it all began. But what was even crazier, Mike, was our vision. I mean, at the time, there were 8,500 camps in the United States. And the one little twist we wanted to put on Christian camping, about half of them would say they were Christ-centered. But we couldn't find a camp that was like truly multicultural, multi-economic, multiracial. I mean, just we wanted to like be this active living response to Jesus's prayer in John 17, where he prays that all the believers would be one. And we're like, surely, if unity and reconciliation can work anywhere, it's at summer camp.
Should be church,
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the church,
Sure,
absolutely.
Camp,
But with camp, a Christ-centered camp, I mean, everybody is like, what did my mom get me into? What did my youth pastor sign me up for? You can't really bring your reputation with you. So it levels the playing field for these kids. And they're all coming in just like so vulnerable, and just trying to figure out, how do I fit in? I mean, they don't realize that I'm the star middle linebacker of my football team. But on the flip side, they don't realize I'm the misfit that doesn't have any friends in the youth group. And so they're just like putty in your hands. And if you can just like be intentional in the programming, and just love them like those, kids that we had, back at Camp Mac in '99. It's incredible what God can do in 5 days.
So what happens when you start talking about your dream and you're really getting to where it's going to happen? So you start talking to faith leaders.
Yes.
Church leaders.
Demoralizing.
About what? Whoa!
It was demoralizing. I mean, just to be honest.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's why we're talking, because
here's the mad scientist who God gave a vision to, who sold everything and literally bought the farm. And I was thinking we need to come under the umbrella of somebody who knows how to do summer camp, because I don't have a clue, And I'm just like, I just feel like I'm a vessel at this point. And I'm like studying all these camps through the American Camping Association, Christian Camping International, and just trying to figure out like,
the same discipline you brought to genetics, you're now bringing to camping.
Right.
Yeah.
So doing the due diligence. And I thought if we could just come under their umbrella and be their multicultural arm of their ministry, they've already got the curriculum figured out. I mean, the logistics, the transportation. I mean, they got everything figured out. I don't know how to do any of that stuff.
Right.
And so we spent 2 years networking to all these Mr. and Miss Teenage Americas, that were like third, fourth generation Christian camping.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them would meet with me, and usually the message was, man, brother, I love you. I love your heart, but it's not going to work. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. I mean, did you hear my story?
Yeah.
I've got this farm. I mean, God's called me, and they're just like, the needs of the kids are too different, Tommy. And some of these camps were for profit.
Right.
And they had a heart for low-income kids. And so what they would do is like establish a nonprofit arm and use a lot of these proceeds, because camps are profitable. And they put it into a foundation and started this for low-income kids. And it was so perplexing, Mike, because, it was very similar facilities, programs, staff. Everything was the same except for the affluent kids were over here and the poor kids were over here.
Right.
And I just, as humbly as I could, just asked the question. I was like, isn't this what Jesus was all about? Is there anything to be gained from having rich and poor together, black, white, Hispanic, and refugee together at the same place at the same time?
Right.
And the resounding feedback was, the needs of the kids are too different, and you're going to dilute yourself, Tommy, if you push all these different demographics together. 5 days isn't long enough. 2 weeks isn't long enough to bridge all these gaps and tear down these walls. And so after 2 years of like the Lord closing doors, I come back to Franklin, Tennessee, of all places. And there was a pastor named Scott Rowley and another pastor named Denny Denson who had created Empty Hands Fellowship.
Right.
And an African-American pastor named Chris Williamson invited me to go share at Empty Hands Fellowship.
Right. Now, Empty Hands, for those of you who do not know, was a movement of churches in the Franklin area.
That's right.
To respond to the poverty issues in Franklin. Williamson County is affluent, but not every part of Williamson County is affluent.
That's
and
right.
There were significant pockets that were being overlooked, and Scott Rowley and others had the burden for this. And Scott eventually retired from his church, resigned, and actually moved in and did this cross-cultural thing.
He did. He had a huge heart for racial reconciliation. Right. And the other pastor that co-founded it, he's a former Black Panther.
Right.
And these two pastors were kind of sharing space in Franklin, and they're at odds. And the Lord just brought them together and created one of the sweetest friendships. And that inspired all of us to kind of come to the table. And so that was really
so if you're in this area, that is
that's right.
well-known and well-respected.
Yeah. So a lot of those men and leaders that came to that meeting kind of became the nucleus of us saying, hey, maybe the Lord's asking us to go blaze a trail. We thought it was going to be this, and we're going to come under this umbrella, but it feels like God has closed enough doors, and now it's this. Yeah. And we're supposed to go out and do this.
You never end up doing what you thought you were going to do.
No. Truly, the Lord only gives you as much as you can handle.
And then you start out, and it's like, no, here's what I really had in mind.
That's right.
But if I had told you, you'd freaked on me and bucked like a horse and not run the right way. So you find this core of believers who have a similar dream in a different expression.
That's right.
They were doing education, poverty, that kind of thing.
Yes.
You were doing the camps.
That's right.
And so these dreams come together. They blend together.
Yeah, I'll never forget talking to the founder of New Hope Academy, Paige Pitts.
Yeah.
Amazing family. And New Hope was probably in their 4th or 5th year at the time. So they're seasoned veterans in this space. And I remember going, to Merides.
Okay, and New Hope is the school
That's right.
that came out of this same passion.
That's right. Christ Community had helped launch this school.
For a cross-cultural educational experience.
That's right.
Very, very successful school in the area.
Yeah, and the mission statement was eerily similar, to what God had put on my heart as a summer camp. So like you said, just a different expression. And so Paige was so kind to grab a meal with me. And it's like, what would New Hope Academy look like as a summer camp? And really, that's where a lot of our initial families came from, was from that.
Now, when we talk about church, the ministry and engaged church network, we use words like calling You have your calling. We all have the same calling to share the gospel. And you had a calling to reach the cross-cultural experience. Okay? Your context is where it got different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my context is a local church.
Mm-hmm.
I love the local church. That's where I'm happy. I thrive in a local church context. Your context was the summer camps. Okay, so let's talk about the work of the church that happens in the summer camp.
Mm.
The evangelism, the discipleship. Right. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So talk to me about that.
So we've been blessed with 90 different ethnicities.
Wow.
That come to camp now. And all the different flags, hanging in the gym. And that would not be possible without, truly being a parachurch ministry
mm-hmm.
and coming alongside, churches that have a heart for this. They're trying to figure it out. They're familiar with John 17.
Mm-hmm.
They know heaven, is going to be this incredible, picture that's painted in Revelation 7:9 with every tribe, nation, and tongue. And they're just trying to figure out, how are y'all doing this? What does this look like?
Right.
Can we be a part of this?
Right.
And so that has really been...
Can you give focus to the energy and the passion we have?
That's right.
And
That's right. Yeah. And so it has been, Barefoot's been such a vehicle of hope in this space, because we've kind of, shown that, man, God shows up for this, and He is all about this. And the kids, the younger they are, the better they do in these environments. And so the kids are really kind of leading the way.
Yeah. Once they know they're loved and safe,
that's right.
They thrive.
Yeah. And so
but the sneaky thing about Barefoot Republic is there is a lightness to summer camp. Okay, we feel this need to be part of cross-cultural experience. What do we do? Let's go do a summer camp. It doesn't sound as heavy as planning a church.
That's right.
Or it's like, we can do summer camp.
Yeah. And so, Mike, 26 years in now, it's like our youngest campers are in their 30s now.
Yeah.
And some of them are youth pastors. Some of them are pastors.
Right.
All other professions and careers now too. And our hope is that they're walking away, from these 5 days. Now, some of them are coming for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're planting trees in their honor, which is like the dream.
Right.
But even if you come for 1 week, when you go back home and you experience prejudice or racism or stereotypes,
mm-hmm.
I think 99.9% of these kids are like, wait a second. Not all.
I know better.
Exactly.
I know better now.
Yes. Psalm 133 talks about how good and pleasant it is when brothers and sisters live together in unity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, it's like, how many opportunities do we really get to live together in unity?
Right.
There's lots of opportunities to kind of visit together, but like truly live together.
From the history of Nashville, music did that.
Yeah.
Man, it wasn't unusual for white and black musicians to get together.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why Nashville has a very different racial history than a lot of southern cities.
Yeah.
I am a pastor of a church, and I have lots of responsibilities, getting enough Sunday school teachers, getting enough things. And then you walk into my office and say, hey, I want to go do a camp.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take leaders. I want to take money. I want to take... Now, understand how I'm saying this, right? And you're taking this out of the church. Now, that's not what happens, but that's the way a lot of pastors feel.
Right.
You are now becoming a competitor.
Thank you for saying that.
For talent and resources. Mm-hmm. We know that's not the truth, but that's the way it feels.
Yes.
So, and a lot of our friends that are watching this, Tommy, are going, hey, that's a good idea, but...
Right. I can barely get kids to go
to
my event.
I can barely get this. So talk about how you can do things that you may not be able to do in the context of the local church, and how your ministry feeds back to the local church.
That's a great question, and that has been a real struggle for us. The typical church partner for us is usually the one that's under-resourced.
Right.
A lot of the primitive Baptist churches, the small Hispanic churches, the Nepalese churches.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much diversity in Nashville, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But typically that's where our kids are coming from. And that's an answer to prayer. I mean, we intentionally reserve half our spots for low-income kids, and we're raising hundreds of thousands in scholarships a year to be able to say yes to those families. But we're just as intentional about trying to get the affluent kids to come.
Right.
And what you just painted, as a description is so accurate. I mean, so many times the affluent churches, they see us as competition.
Right.
And we're just like, oh, man, that's painful, because we're like, summer is still 12 weeks. And we totally believe in youth groups going and doing their own camps. That's why I'm sitting here. I shared that I went, with Matt Canna on a church retreat. It changed my life forever. So I would never discourage churches from that. We have said, I mean, are there a nucleus of families? Is there a core group, that you just know has a bent, towards trying to get out of the bubble a little bit, have a multicultural, Christ-centered experience that's safe and fun and uplifting. And we think, if we could identify those families and they come experience Barefoot Republic, they're going to come back and just infiltrate those, children's ministries and youth ministries and student ministries in really positive and meaningful ways. And so that's kind of our strategy right now. And we realize, I mean, if a mega church were to say, we want to send, all 200 of our kids, to Barefoot this summer, I mean, that would totally sway the demographics in the other direction. We don't have the capacity. I mean, the average session for us is about 150 kids.
Right.
So we can only have about 75, affluent kids if we really want to be multi-economic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes good sense. Now, let me come at it a different way. I'm pastor of a local church. You're a good Christian, Tommy. You come to church, you tithe, you had your family there. I got plans for you as a pastor. Okay, you come to me with this totally out of nowhere dream and vision that you're committed to. You're not going to teach Sunday school. You're not going to sing in the choir. I'm being a little facetious here, but to make the point. But you're going to go off and do how, and you're not the only one. There are a lot of people in the pews who are dreaming a God dream, but it's not in the traditional structure.
Yeah.
What do you want your pastor to say?
Man, my heart would be for them to say, run after that.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to my disobedience, for about 7 years, I wish a pastor, would have been like, man, Tommy, that is awesome. If God has put that call in your life, I want to cover you in prayer. I want to help resource you, open doors. I'll never forget, I mean, Scotty Smith.
Let me get with some business leaders and let's put this plan together.
Yeah. I mean, Scotty Smith at the height, of Christ Community, back in the late 90s when God, had this call in my life, was gracious enough to take a meeting with me. And I'll never forget, he wasn't my pastor. I didn't know him from Adam. I knew he was kind of a big deal. And he was like, Tommy, I don't have a lot of time to give you, but I'd love to give you an endorsement. And I'll never forget, he gives me this piece of paper. I don't know what half the words mean.
Scotty had that way.
Yeah, so like, I need to look these up, Scotty, But all he said, he just looked at me, he's like, use this.
Yeah.
And it was incredible to see. I mean, a lot of folks thought we were a PCA camp.
Right.
because that
Scotty
endorsement,
had that kind of influence.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden, West End Community got involved, Covenant Pres got, it was just incredible to see the ripple effect. And so that would be my hope, for a pastor who has people in their congregation who has this vision for parachurch ministry. But at the end of the day, we are trying to connect all of our kids because half of our kids are unchurched.
Right.
And so our dream is to get them plugged in. And we're looking at like regional maps and population density and trying to figure out who do we know in this neighborhood? Because obviously a lot of kids are coming to faith in Christ for the first time at Barefoot.
Right. And you need to have the partner
We
church.
can't disciple them.
No.
We don't have the bandwidth to disciple them.
Well, you don't have the opportunity. They're not going to stay at the camp.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that would be my hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy, thanks for being here. And
thanks for the opportunity.
This is Tommy Rhodes. He is the executive director or president? What is
executive
it?
Director
of the Barefoot Republic. If you are a pastor, understand that God is always at work in his world. He's always at work in your congregation. It's just sometimes it may not be within the four walls of the local church. So when you have somebody like Tommy comes to you and say, I'm dreaming about Pay attention to what's going on in their lives. God may be up to something, and if he is, make sure you're in the middle of it. I'm Mike Glenn, and this is the Engaged Church Network podcast. Thanks for joining us.